and I'll be structuring these around different questions. So the first one that that why do we have to think about intersectionality? Like, what is the need or significance for thinking about this particular framework? So I'm going to build a false binary here between the normal common way of doing animal rights activism in the country and this intersectional framework. Like, what exactly is the difference, and why do we need the intersectional framework? Like, what exactly is wrong with the way that we are doing it right now? So the usual way of doing animal rights activism right now is to focus on the individual, right? Because we are trying to convert as many people to veganism as possible. So it is very individual focused like that. And also the way of communicating uh, is mostly through moral argumentation. We are like depending a lot on morality, on certain principles and arguments like that, logical arguments like, it is wrong to kill sentient beings and because they have an interest in living. So if you have the choice, then veganism is a moral obligation. So what we are doing is we are approaching the whole topic through this logic and moral argumentation in a very decontextualized way. That is the way that we are doing vegan activism or animal rights activism in general right now. It is very decontextualized. Matlab, the particular argument that we are using, right? For example, it is wrong to kill sentient animals. It can be applied to any context. It can be applied to any region of the country without really learning much about those particular regions or the people who are involved in animal farming or animal agriculture, people who are working in slaughterhouses and things like that. We don't really have to learn or know much about any of these, and we can still, develop an argument and apply that argument to any region across the country. So that is the usual way that we are doing animal rights activism. It is mostly decontextualized like that. So and also the responsibility for changing, right? Since we are depending on the individual to enact change, to bring about change, and to make the world better for the animals, it all depends on the individual. We are trying to convert as many people to veganism. So it all depends on the individual. So all the responsibility also falls on the individual. So we usually put the blame on the individual, on a particular person who is listening to us, and we ask them, you have to like go vegan or you have to start caring about animals. It all depends on that particular person. So we don't really have, and whatever arguments that they raise to defend their meat eating or to defend their dairy or egg consumption, we have a counter argument for that, and it goes like that. And that is how the vegan conversation is always in the form of a debate. We are always trying to debunk the other person's argument. So there is very little scope for understanding why that particular person is saying the things that he's saying. Why is he or why is she raising those particular arguments in defense of their consumption habits? What is the social condition? What is his upbringing? What are the conditions of his life that have produce these arguments basically? What exactly are the background factors that are making him say these arguments, right? So right now in the way that we do animal rights activism, we don't really have a scope for going into details like that. Uh, so that is where intersectionality comes in, right? And intersectionality is a framework. It is not exactly an identity or anything. It is just a framework. It is a device that we can use to make sense of reality. So the reality is of animal agriculture, of animal slaughter, exploitation, the different ways in which all that exploitation is normalized, and things like that. And intersectionality is only a device. It is sort of like a lens that can help to see the things that were invisible until now, right? For example, if you're looking at animal exploitation, something might not necessarily be visible the first time you're looking at it. So intersectionality is basically a lens. It is a tool or a device to make those things that were invisible before visible, right? It is to foreground those things, right? So the whole concept of intersectionality emerges from black scholarship and critical race theory and things like that. It was originated in a work by a theorist called Kimberly Crenshaw. She was a black legal studies scholar, and she introduced that concept in order to uh, raise the argument that black women they experience oppression at two levels. On the first level, they are being oppressed as women, right? Because women are oppressed in a patriarchal culture, and and on top of that, they are also oppressed because they are black, right? And being black will also, like reduce their access. It will create more sorts of violations and violence on them, and a lot of like multiple oppressions that result because they are black. So, for example, to give an Indian example, give me a second. To give an Indian example, for instance, uh, let's assume a Dalit family. This is from a movie called Veli Marangal, which I would recommend to you because it shows the human animal relationships of like oppressed people and oppressed animals at the margins. It's a great movie. You can find it on Amazon Prime. So,
Sorry,
what
which
happens
movie is
to,
it?
yeah, yes,
Can you
Aditya.
repeat which movie?
The movie is called Whale Marangal. I'll type it out in the chat once the session is over. It is available on Amazon Prime. So I'm just drawing an example from that. It is about a Dalit family who are living in a place in a mangrove forest. It's a very swampy area and it gets flooded during the rains, right? So in one particular thunderstorm, the entire house gets flooded and they lose their dwelling basically. And then they go to the government office and they are promised compensation and alternate houses and all. But then the condition is that they have to produce their Aadhaar card. But then they don't have an Aadhaar card. So if you look at the oppressions in this particular case from an intersectional lens, what we see is that first of all, these people they are at the margins of society. They are a Dalit family, so the caste angle is there, and the caste system has pushed them to the margins of the society, and the larger society or the more privileged castes and classes they live in the center of society, right? They live in the more habitable places. While the lesser privileged, the underprivileged, they are pushed to the margins of society into the more uninhabitable places where there is frequent flooding, there's frequent drought and things like that. So they are pushed to the margins of the society because of their caste. And since they're pushed to the margins of the society, they don't really have the access to a lot of these information regarding, for example, Aadhaar registration. That you have to have the information delivered to you about Aadhaar registration. Only then can you, go and sign up for Aadhaar. So because they don't have an Aadhaar, because they don't have access due to their caste, they are also prevented from compensation. So you see how the oppression works in several levels, right? First, the caste angle, which denies them access, and then the government policy angle, which excludes them because they don't have a particular document. So the oppression is happening at first the level of caste, then the level of being vulnerable to environmental climate change and the effects of climate change relative to other populations, and also at the level of the governmental policy and the governmental law enforcement and things like that, because the government will only consider certain people as citizens who have certain documents and things like that. So this is basically what the function of intersectionality is. It tries to bring in a lot of factors in oppression. It tries to look at the different levels at which a particular person is being oppressed, right? So in the case of animal rights, if you're going to, like apply intersectionality, if you're going to use the framework of intersectionality in animal agriculture, for example. Now let us take the instance of a female buffalo, right? So, and now intersectionality would tell us to look at the different levels at which this particular buffalo experiences oppression. So first, it is because the buffalo is an animal, right? And since the buffalo is not a human, it does not really get moral consideration. It is treated like an object. It can be treated anyhow, and it does not really matter. Right? There is no consequences for however you treat a buffalo because the buffalo is an animal. So first of all, there is a speciesism because of which the buffalo is oppressed. Because you look at the buffalo as a mere animal, and on the next level, there is the gendered speciesism, like the gender angle. Because it is a she buffalo, right? And a she buffalo is exploited for her reproductive system. She is artificially inseminated. She is made to, she's forcibly impregnated, then made to deliver a baby. The baby is taken from her, and all those oppression that is a consequence of her being a female, right? Just because she is female that she has to go through all that oppression. Now, this is not to say that the male buffalo is privileged in any way, because in the case of animals, privilege only means that the buffalo is being oppressed in another way, while the female buffalo is being oppressed through exploitation of their reproductive system, milking, denial of motherhood, and all that. The male buffalo would in turn be exploited by, like forcing them to ejaculate into a false vagina, then making them ejaculate several times a day, denying them any freedom, and things like that, right? So that is the second level of oppression, which is the gendered speciesism, the gender wala oppression. Now, the third level of oppression would be the caste angle, because a buffalo, as you know, does not really have any, like auspicious associations in mythology. For example, in Hindu mythology or in most local mythologies, buffalo is not really, considered any vehicle of a god, or it does not really pass off as holy, and therefore the caste angle gives certain privileges to the cow, but then that is denied to the buffalo. So what happens is that you can kill a buffalo. It doesn't really matter. There is no law that prevents a buffalo from getting killed. So you can kill a buffalo, and it is legitimate also, right? And no one is going to protest against it or anything like that. So there is the third angle of caste. Now the fourth level of oppression would be the level of capitalism. For example, the buffalo is treated as an object from which you can make money. So it is basically treated as a machine that gives you milk. So you can impregnate it as many times as you want, and then until it dies, it will produce milk, right? So it is treated as an object to make profit. So that is the whole capitalism angle. Capitalism will convert a living sentient being into an object that is a profit-making machine. It is a milking machine, basically. So what you see is on the single subject of a buffalo, right? On the single body of one she buffalo, you can see different levels of violence are accumulating one over the other. First, there is the animal. The species is a mangle. She is exploited because she is an animal. Then she is exploited because she is a female animal. She is also exploited because she does not really belong to a privileged upper caste, or like she does not really have any privileged associations in mythology. So she's oppressed because of the caste and religion angle, and finally she's also oppressed by the capitalism angle, which converts her into an object for profit, right? So this is basically the function of intersectionality. For the ordinary method of the common method of doing animal rights, it just takes it as granted that the buffalo is an oppressed animal. The buffalo is exploited. Does not really go into the details of how exactly the buffalo is exploited. It does not really go into the details of the conditions of the environment in which a buffalo is exploited. For example, the buffalo is exploited in an environment where casteism is rampant, or in an environment where capitalism is given free rein. So intersectionality forces you to look into the conditions that enable this oppression, right? Uh, while the usual common popular method of doing animal rights takes it for granted that a buffalo is oppressed, intersectionality actually goes deeper and tries to see why is the buffalo oppressed, how is the buffalo oppressed, what are the factors that contribute to the oppression of buffaloes, and that is what gives us all these answers. The answers of the buffalo is oppressed on the levels of caste, buffalo is oppressed by class, capitalism, and all these things. Right. So that is one way of imagining intersectionality as levels one on top of the other, under which the animal is there. And the animal is oppressed by the weight of all these levels individually. Right. Now, another way of imagining intersectionality is as a chaurasta. Now, intersection, like the word itself means a chaurasta, a crossroads. Like there is a lot of roads like meeting at a particular junction, and this junction is what is common to all these roads, right? Now, if you, for example, you can imagine a cow, a desi cow, which is considered as holy, and like apparently it is very privileged. It is the most privileged animal in India. People think that. So suppose that cow is at the intersection. The cow is at the junction of all these powers, and one of those roads would be the animal, the speciesism angle, because the cow is an animal. It is okay to like exploit her for milk and things like that. The other road that would be the other path of oppression would be the religion and cultural angle, because you're considering the cow as a holy mother, and you're considering the cow as a holy animal. Because you're considering the cow as a holy animal, if I'm saying that the cow is my mother, and that also entitles me to her milk, right? If I'm considering the cow as my mother, then that milk belongs to me. So you're basically normalizing the exploitation of cows for milk through this religious angle, right? And you're also, by considering her holy, you are also like restricting her movement, because you cannot really imagine a holy mother cow, a holy animal, like moving freely and having sex with whichever animal she pleases. You can't really imagine a holy cow or a holy animal, being homosexual like that, because a lot of the animals are homosexual, especially cows. Homosexuality has been evidenced in domestic animals like cows, but then it would be hard for us to imagine cows as a holy cow as indulging in homosexuality. So what you do is you put her in a cow shed. You put a nose rope through her nose, and you basically restrict her movement. You police her very severely, and you decide who she should mate with, and you also take her cows away from her. So there are different paths. There are different ways in which this oppression is getting impacted on the cow. Right. First of all, obviously there is the religion and cultural angle, the caste angle. Secondly, as I said, there is the animal angle, and just like in the buffalo's case, there is also the capitalism angle, because you are going to sell the milk of the cow at the end of the day. So it is for that you are going to, that you're keeping her captive and all that. So there is the capitalism angle, then there is the gender angle, because it is a cow that you're exploiting her, a female cow that you're exploiting her reproductive system and all that. So you can imagine this as a chaurasta, as all the different oppressions are coming together at this particular animal called the cow, right? Now, this is something that intersectionality helps us to see. It helps us to see like the different identities of the cow. Uh, the usual method of animal rights activism takes the cow as just the cow, but then if you're going by the intersectional lens, you also see the cow as a female animal, as an animal that is converted into an object by capitalism, and also as an animal that is considered holy, and that legitimizes the violence that you're doing to the cow. Because if you consider an animal holy, then you can't really think that the animal is being violated, right? Because how can you, like if an animal is worshipped, then you always assume that that animal is having a good life. So you can't really imagine that the cow would be having a bad life, right? So all these different identities of the cow are brought together, and the cow is oppressed in that sense. So intersectionality basically helps you to see the different angles through which an animal is oppressed, right? Now, where exactly do we? The other question is, where exactly do we get this knowledge, right? For example, the knowledge that if you're considering someone as holy, it is not exactly a harmless assumption. For example, if I'm like considering my sister as a holy, as for example, if I'm like treating my sister as a holy person, as like women are considered holy in India, you might think that, for example, an outsider might think that that is a harmless thing to say. That is a nice thing to say, because it signifies how we treat, with how much kindness and respect we treat our the women in our country, and our sisters and mothers and all. But then it also means other things. For example, if you're going to treat a woman as holy, this is what feminism tells us. If you're going to treat women as holy, then it also means that you're going to police her in different ways. You're going to, do surveillance on her in different ways. For example, if a holy mother or a woman who is holy cannot really go out and in the middle of the night, she can't do whatever she pleases. She can't have casual sex. She can't do a lot of things. She has to get married. She has to give birth to children, because she is a holy person after all, right? And she has to carry the honor of her family and things like that. So if she marries against the family's wishes, or if she does anything that is against the family's wishes, then that honor is polluted, and she will be punished for it, because all that is unbecoming of a holy person. If you are going to consider someone as holy, then that person better behave themselves, and better behave like a holy person. So there is that sort of oppression also. So where do we learn this form of analysis? Where do we, get this knowledge that considering someone, whether animal or human, as holy might also be a way of oppressing them? We get it from feminism, especially Indian feminism. Uh, and this is how a lot of intersectionality works. It borrows from different movements, like for example, the anti-capitalism movement, like Marxism and things like that. We try to learn from that movement to see how an animal is converted into an object, is commodified, right? And we also look at anti-caste studies to see how different animals are also given caste. For example, a cow which is considered holy will become untouchable if the cow dies, and an untouchable cow can only be carried or disposed of by untouchable castes like Dalits. So there is a lot of the animals in India have castes like that. So how do we unpack that situation? How do we unpack that reality? We can unpack that reality only with the knowledge that we acquire from the anti-caste movement, Ambedkar's texts, and a lot of the research that is done, studies that are done by scholars who are working in anti-caste movements and studies and things like that. So how intersectionality basically tries to borrow different knowledges, different lessons from other movements, and tries to grow the animal rights movement through knowledges that we acquire from other places, right? So this is basically a way of movement building, because if you are going to stick to the same strategy, that is moral argumentation, like saying that this is moral and this is not moral, and therefore you have to do the moral thing because it is a moral obligation. If you're going to stick to that line of argument only, then the movement can grow at a very slow pace. Instead, if you're going to borrow from different movements, if you're going to borrow strategies and ways of understanding reality from different moments, then that is also a way of building our own moment, right? For example, if I'm going to talk about my own state, elephants are considered very special in Kerala. They are given like several protections by the law also. It's not just by people, but by the law. And because they are such a protected animal, we don't really pay attention to how they are exploited. We always think that that this animal is considered very special in Kerala, so it must be having a good life, right? So we are borrowing lessons from feminism and things like that to understand how considering elephants as holy, in fact, allows or enables a system where you can go to the forest and kidnap elephants and put them in chains and use them for labor in the city. Uh, so all these lessons we are getting from different other movements like feminism and anti-capitalism, anti-caste, and things like that, right? So. Uh, this is so intersectionality basically borrows from all these other movements and tries to build solidarity with other movements. So that is a way of doing intersectionality. Like how exactly do you put intersectionality into practice is one, by understanding how other movements work, and then using those that understanding for our own movement to understand how animal agriculture works, and also by making sure that we ourselves do not reproduce these violence in our own circles. For example, if you're going to oppose the exploitation of cows and their reproductive systems, and if you're going to oppose the gendered exploitation of cows, like exploiting cows because they are female, then it is our duty, like as animal rights activists, it is our duty to also oppose any forms of violence uh, that are made on women in our own circles. Like for example, in the animal rights movement, if there is any episode of violence on women, then we should be opposing that. We have a duty to oppose that. We also have a duty to build a safe space. We have a duty to ensure that women are represented in the core committees and in the organizer groups and things like that. We also have a duty to make sure that we, in our own personal life, in our own selves, are not really reproducing the same violence to which we are opposed. So we are opposed to treating less powerful beings in a bad way. So it means that we should also not treat like less powerful beings in a bad way, right? For example, people who are younger to us or people who might not be as privileged as us, we have a duty to understand where they're coming from, to understand their social situation, and to not show any signs of violence to them, to not oppress them in the way, to not oppress them basically. So what we are saying is that intersectionality goes both ways, and solidarity also goes both ways. At once, we are borrowing lessons from other movements. At the same time, we also owe it to the other movement that we will also be feminist, we will also be anti-caste, we will also try to question capitalist modes of production and capitalist exploitation of workers and things like that. We have a duty to question and oppose all that. At the same time, the other movements, like for example, the feminist movement, the anti-caste movement, also have a duty to look at how they themselves, in their own personal lives, and also in their own movement, are oppressing animals in the same way that other humans oppress them. Right? For example, feminists have a duty to oppose patriarchy and patriarchal treatment of women, and they have a duty to oppose misogyny. At the same time, they also have a duty to oppose the same system of violence when it is solidarities across movements, learning from other movements, applying that knowledge to animal agriculture, and also being responsible in giving back to those other movements. Right. We also, in a more practical way, we also can express solidarity by like writing in solidarity with them or creating art in solidarity with a certain protest that is happening against rape or against workers exploitation and things like that. We can express we as animal rights activists can express our solidarity to those protests by turning up at the protests, by writing banners, by participating in demonstrations, by sharing things on social media, by raising awareness, and a lot of things like that. So it depends on your that in all cultures and in all regions, in all countries, the human is considered, it is always the ideal human, right? So there is no one who is fully human. There is always this range, there is always the spectrum. On one end, there is the fully human, and on the other end, there is the animal. And in between, there is the subhuman, or, like the less than human, or someone who is like an animal, someone who is animalized, and things like that. So what happens is the whole category of the human, right? It is very exclusionary. Matlab, when you are going to talk about the human, about who is fully human, you are always going to exclude some people who are in the human species, but then they are not considered fully human. So this has happened throughout history. For example, in colonialism, a lot of Indians were excluded from the category of the human because according to the Western countries and according to Western cultures, the fully human you get is there is a whole category of the human. And it is a bubble basically. It does not include everyone. For example, in India, it would include the upper caste, the higher classes, the rich people, the bureaucrats, the power holders, and people like that. And it would exclude everyone else. It would exclude the Dalits, it would exclude the Adivasis and people who are living away from society and things like that. So what happens is that the people who are excluded, the humans who are excluded, they find themselves side by side with the animals because in order to exclude certain humans, first of all, you have to treat them as animals, right? You have to treat a black person. You have to see that the black person is basically an animal, so that you can do whatever you want to that black person. So what happens is the black person stands side by side with the animal in a very oppressive system, right? Now, what a lot of anti-racist activists and feminist activists and all the people who have been excluded from from being human, who have been told to stand outside, what they have done is they have questioned this. They have associated with themselves to question how we are being excluded. Like, for example, if I am a gay person, I will be questioning how the whole heteronormativity, like how like a normalized sexual order. For example, if the only normal way of having sex is through heterosexual encounters, then I, as a gay person, would be excluded from it, right? So it is my duty, or I would obviously be opposing that particular normal. Like, this is not the only way to be normal. That we are also normal, and animals are also oppressed. For example, if you look at how spaces are, how the city is managed in India, especially before 377 got decriminalized, gay people and homosexuals, they were often hounded up by the police. They were beaten up by the police. They were arrested by the police because of how they were, because of like how they had sex, because of how they were, and most of the public places were out of limits for them. Right, they were all excluded from the city spaces and from public spaces. Right. Basically, they were denied their sexuality, their natural sexuality. They were denied. Now, if you look at any possibility of being homosexual, right? So there are these.
Sorry to interrupt. This 10 minutes remaining.
Yeah, sure. So there are these overlaps in the way that humans are oppressed and how animals are oppressed, and this is how we can build solidarities by looking at these overlaps, these intersections in oppressions. Right. Now, going back to the cow or buffalo example, all these systems of oppression, for example, caste oppression, class oppression of animals, I'm talking, caste oppression, class oppression, oppression by capitalism, by gender, all these oppressions will energize each other because they basically feed into each other, right? It is only if, ableism as well. It is only if you consider a cow as holy, you're going to exploiting her reproductive system through artificial insemination, things like that. And if the cow is, for example, injured or disabled, or if she gives birth to a disabled calf, then you're going to kill that calf because there is no use, there is no worth in their existence. So basically, you're going to decide how much another being's existence is worth, right? So all these oppressions, you can see them that they are interlocked like that. So they all intersect and they interlock and they energize each other, right? They feed into each other, they borrow from each other, they energize each other. So when we are confronted with a system of it has different victims and it has different ways of operating. But at the end of the day, it is the same oppression that we are all affected by. So intersectionality basically, pushes us to think about solidarity. It pushes us to borrow from other moments, as I said, and it pushes us to look at the conditions that enable, the oppression of animals. It 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 shifts from the usual popular approach. The popular approach is to hold the individual as responsible. For example, if I'm talking continues to eat meat, like what is their social position? Like what is the situation at home? What is their job? And what are the details of their culture, their religion, and things like that, which enable them or which like make them continue with the practice of eating meat and like being complicit in a particular sort of violence to animals, right? Uh, so intersectionality basically shifts the focus from individuals to systems, to conditions, and by systems I mean the way things are, right? So we are going to animal scavengers who don't really who are not given any opportunities outside that particular job. Not in the same way, but in a similar way, maybe. Even slaughterhouse workers, they would be doing that job out of free will, yes. But at the same time, they are also forced by several systems, like the caste system, capitalism, which like denies them any other job and forces them to do that particular job. A lot of those factors are also forcing them to continue with the job of animal agriculture. So intersectionality basically asks us to look at the large social context or reality, basically. So when you try to understand it, you realize that it is a lot more complex than you thought. And therefore, our answers to this, our responses to these problems will also be a little more complex, will also be more nuanced and things like that, so that we can develop the movement further, we can grow as a movement, right? Now, what is the need for intersectionality in a country like India? First of all, India is like really diverse. So the usual method of arguing for animal rights is always you can like and things like that. They are very limited, right? It is a small fraction of the population. So if you're going to make only that small population as our audience, then the animal rights movement will be limited to such a small section of the public, right? Instead, if we are going to have something to say about the social conditions that still keep people in a very underprivileged status, then we have a relevance in the whole country. We should have our own, contribution to the debates in the country about social. So intersectionality basically pushes us to ask the difficult questions. Now, in conclusion, uh, most debates around intersectionality, because there are a lot of misconceptions and things like that. A usual question that is raised is, are you basically saying that is it okay for Adivasis to eat meat? Now, the problem with that question is the wrong question to ask, right? Now, if you're going to think about what is the use of asking that question, is it okay for Adivasis to eat meat? There is no use for that question because, for example, if I'm going to say yes, it is okay for Adivasis to eat meat, then basically you are, okay, taking Adivasis outside your audience and you're going to talk to the remainder of the privileged audience, right? Now, for example, if I'm going to say that it is not okay for Adivasis to eat meat, then I'm still not really looking at what their condition is or anything relationship with the animals that they hunt. Is it a spiritual practice or is it just for food? And are there any voices within the Adivasi community that is speaking against the practice of hunting or things like that? And what are the spiritual teachings within that particular Adivasi community uh, that looks like animal ethics? That is basically animal ethics, because it is not only the vegan activists who have a wholesale maybe behavior change or any sort of advocacy activism. It should always come from a position of understanding. So we should not really assume that their position is something that I understand. I should actually go into that whole situation and try to understand their position, and then from within that organic space, within that synthesis of, like conversation. That is where